Welcome DePaul fans to another episode of Blue Demon Banter brought to you by We Are DePaul. And we are joined by a special guest, an interesting guest. Has had the privilege of covering both DePaul basketball and Northwestern basketball over the last couple of years. We welcome in Tom Gorski. Tom, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Honestly, I'm just glad that you asked me to be on because, since it's been out of school, I've been watching college hoops, but it doesn't feel the same knowing I'm not repping, blue or purple. So, yeah, being able to follow both teams now. I don't have a side anymore. I'm more of a neutral party now, which is really great that I get to watch both teams do really well. And yeah, man, I'm just really excited to be here and I'm ready to talk some ball.
Yeah, so tell us about your time with DePaul and Northwestern. What years did you cover both teams?
Yeah, oh, DePaul. We're going back because I just graduated from grad school from Northwestern, so we're gonna. I believe like 22. We're gonna go 23 to 24. Yeah, I think it's like we'll just go from like 2 years. I covered the last 2 years of the Stubblefield era. I was around for the Javon Johnson era, Moji Gibson, Elijah Fisher, even the last year of Nick Agenda when he had that great play in the tournament and out there in Madison Square Garden. So yeah, that was a great one. Last year was where I was with Northwestern, very unconventional year, I guess, from a Chris Collins standpoint, as you would say.
Hmm.
It was one of the biggest years that they've probably really struggled and just faced nothing but adversity. So yeah, I covered DePaul for 2 years, and then I covered Northwestern last year. And yeah, I'm actually covering Colorado Buffalo football right now out there for Pac-12. So, I'm covering football and basketball for them. So a little different from Big East and Big Ten to say the least. But yeah, I'm really glad to be able to finally just be able to neutral of both parties, and I'm really excited for the matchup this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. We will preview it later this episode, but first time we got to talk about that DePaul game last night on
Yeah.
Tuesday against Buffalo. It's a game that DePaul heavy favored. They should have won. Buffalo came in on Ken Palm in the 300s. DePaul came in, in the 80s and 90s, and to say the least, DePaul did not have a great game, did not play great. All around, not a great game. First half was brutal. First half was brutal. I don't know if I've seen a first half or a half as bad as that in the Chris Holman era. And I mean, of course, it's only, two
Yeah.
years. But it was bad. Like, it was very bad. Like, those were like the Tony Stubblefield eras, how bad the first half was. And I know you, Tom, you know how bad those teams were in the Tony Stubblefield era, but it was bad. Like, it was bad. DePaul did not come ready to play. Buffalo was all over them early. Buffalo was all over them early. They got out to a big run at one point with a 17-2 run. They were up big, Buffalo, 25-7 at one point, and it was all Buffalo. And you got to credit Buffalo for what they did, but DePaul was not ready to play. First half, no movement on offense at all. The ball was not being moved. They were scared to drive inside, and you saw them early on. They wanted to drive inside. They tried to. The Buffalo presence was there. And since after the first 5 minutes, they stopped going inside, and that led to bad passes, no one moving in offense, missed shots, and that's when Buffalo went on their run. But Tom, I want to ask you. Obviously, you're not covering them
Yeah.
anymore, but I want to ask you about what your thoughts are, or what you're hearing from the public about this DePaul team in general. Entering the year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is it's got to be the most positive and most exciting time for DePaul basketball in some time. Sure, I covered the Tony Stubblefield era, which was I don't want to say the most depressing time for DePaul basketball, but there was just a lot of lack of inspiration, not just from the fans, but even from just the players, especially towards the end of that era was really rough. Holtman, we've seen him have so much success. We saw him at Ohio State, and we even saw him with Butler years back as well, where he's a program builder. And when you're able to get constantly 3-star recruits, you're going to be able to land a 4-star recruit. And Isaiah Medina, I believe, was a 4-star that they got. And when you look at that and you look at the landscape of the Big East, it's tough. UConn, Marquette,
Right.
those are teams where DePaul's nowhere near them. But it's about building a foundation. And I think that's something you're seeing from Chris Holtman this year, just in the offseason from he literally I remember when I covered his press conference, they didn't bring a single player back. It was a brand new
Yep.
team. So a year ago, you have a bunch of new faces. Then this year, heading into this year, now you're able to kind of build on that. And by building on that creates excitement, and you get to see what Holtman's vision really is. Because I would argue for most coaches, it doesn't matter if you're Chris Holtman or you're taking over a different program, top tier, bottom tier, middle tier. That second to third year, those are the most crucial years of I don't want to say rebuild, but or a retool. Those are the two kind of key points that you want to really dive in on. And I think now it's like, okay, the foundation's in place. Can we find ways to get into the win column? Can we finish games? What's our identity? And that's something I think a lot of fans are excited about. And just from a public perception of now, it's like, okay, what we see this year will define what DePaul basketball is for years to come. And through the first two games, offense, they scored. Buffalo, not so much, but now you go watch some film. You know kind of what you got. And your first real test now is Northwestern, as Chris Collins is known for his defense, where now you're going to see what they're really all about. And I think that's definitely what's got so many fans excited of your 2-1. A few years back, going back and being able to talk about that,
Yep.
we're like, man, can we just win a game? We might not win a conference game, but can we win at least a non-conference game? So I think that's where fans are excited because they got a little more consistency, but they also have a foundation in place thanks to Chris Holtman.
Yeah, I agree. I think Holman, fantastic hire. They got him, but this game to Buffalo is like
Yeah.
shot to the chest, man. Because this is a game you should have won. A game coming in, you were big favorites, and go 3-0. But the game against Northwestern coming on Friday was huge. But DePaul did not come ready to play, and I thought that they did some nice things in the second half, some better things in the second half, moving the ball. Their defense was picked it up in the second half, but just they could not overcome that first half, and I think one of the more interesting aspects of this DePaul team this year is Caleb Banks. And I really, going into the season, I thought Caleb Banks was going to be that difference maker for this team. And I know
Yeah.
it's still early, but I thought Caleb Banks was going to come in and he was going to put up numbers. Through the first three games, the exhibition games, hasn't really seen much of that, to be honest with you. Tolman actually made the switch to have Banks come off the bench and have Pierre Justin start this game, and I just didn't see anything from Caleb, through the first three games. This is a guy that DePaul needs to step up. Like they got him aggressively in the transfer portal. Like they were up against some big teams to get him. Four-star transfer from
Yep.
Tulane, and I just haven't seen anything from him. He's not playing aggressive on defense. It's not there, and rebounding the basketball. And Holtman in his post-game press conference yesterday kind of called him out and said like, we need Banks to step up the physicality, stepped up with the rebounding because at the end of the game he had a chance at two rebounds and he couldn't corral it, couldn't squeeze onto the ball, and I thought that was a little bit disappointment from Banks throughout the first three games. But I think Banks is going to get going because I think the talent is there. It's just about finding ways, Holtman, to kind of get that motor out of him. Like go to the basket, go drive, make your shots. And outside of that, though, like there wasn't many positives in this game against Buffalo. To be honest with you, Tom, like C.J. Gunn
Yeah.
struggled from the field, Layden Bacher struggled from the field. Benson picked it up in the second half, but Benson's now dealing with a severe sprain on his wrist. So that is, up in the air. I would
Yep.
imagine he's probably fine for Friday because he hurt the wrist in practice the other day, played through it. But these things matter for DePaul, and it looks like
Yeah.
they're trying to find a spark. They're trying to find a spark for this team because they play 12 guys. Like it's just unheard of to play 12 guys in a game that was so close. Obviously, you had guys like come on, Maker only played two, Ilya who played like 30 seconds, and Fabian who played three. But DePaul is searching. They're searching for answers, and it's going to be interesting to see how Holtman and his guys respond on Friday against Northwestern. Because Tom, you've covered this team last year, kind of a down year for them, but this is a good Northwestern team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that like Chris Collins is good. I mean, he's an excellent coach. He is someone who even just got an extension this offseason. There were some rumors of him potentially leaving. We weren't sure how real those actually were. But you're gonna get a very physical team, from Chris Holtman. You're gonna get guys that have high basketball IQs, high intangibles, but also they're going to bury you. They're very aggressive. Nick Martinelli and even last year Brooks Barnheiser. I mean, they weren't just good basketball players. Like they could play defense. They're high motor energy guys, but they're also going to give you all the effort they possibly can on defense. And I would argue that that's the identity of Chris Collins. Is he's someone that coaches really just based on fundamentals. They don't do anything flashy. They don't really do anything that like wows you. They're just consistent. Your big men. They are big. They rebound. They don't shoot. You have Nick Martinelli at the wing where he can shoot. He can play defense. And then they just want a facilitator. That's it. It's really not a complex team and that is really why Chris Collins had so much success over the last decade or two, just because, it's just smart basketball. They don't shoot themselves in the foot. And that's Sturmo covered DePaul for so long. That's really what you saw was a lot of times guys get in foul trouble or they're taking really bad shots. It's like the complete polar opposite of what a Chris Collins team does. They don't even take a lot of threes unless they're wide open. They're going to control the clock. They're going to be very slow paced. And surprisingly, that works because if you don't make mistakes, you win. And that's what Chris Collins does. He's just a winner straight up. And I think DePaul is going to have a lot that they're going to need to bring when you're facing a team like Chris Collins, because not only does he have like a good team, but like he really targets experienced guys. Even when he goes in the transfer portal, we're talking a guy like a Jaden Reed. He's someone from I'm trying to remember where he came from. I believe it was Michigan. It could be wrong. It could be Michigan State. I'm trying to remember where he came from, but he ended up like that's your guy who's taking over a point guard. That's someone that's going to facilitate the offense, and you're going to team him up with a Nick Martinelli, who's now without Brooks Barnheiser. He's going to be taking over the offense as the go-to scorer with no help. Where we got a lot of new faces out there with the Wildcats, and something Chris Holtman, Chris Collins, a lot of new faces. Who do we like more? Chris Collins has a lot of experience in the Big Ten. So does Chris Collins. So I think this is a game that you're going to find out the identity from both teams, and whoever makes the least amount of mistakes is going to come out on top.
Yep, I agree. Jaden Reed from University of Southern Florida. Played
I knew it was a green one, man.
He's good.
I think I was thinking of Jaden Reed from the
You are
Packers.
from the Packers, but he's
Yeah,
green. Michigan State, that's where he went to college. Jaden Reed.
yeah.
This
I knew it
Jaden
was South
Reed
Florida.
on Northwestern went to the University of Southern Florida. But last year, Northwestern, DePaul, Northwestern killed DePaul. DePaul had no shot. DePaul wasn't ready
Yeah,
to play. But I think back to what you were saying, I think both of these teams, they want to live on the defensive end. And I
yeah,
know we talked about it before. Northwestern, very great defense. They're a great defensive team. Right now on Ken Palm, they're 26th on Ken Palm in defensive rating. That's pretty good. That is
yeah,
going to be a big test for a DePaul team that is ranked 195th in offensive rating. So that's a big
yeah,
difference. That pretty will probably decide the game if
yeah,
DePaul is able to score, or if Northwestern allows them to stop them. Because if DePaul can light
yeah,
up from three, I think that's a good thing. Light it up from three is probably going to be tough because DePaul doesn't have the shooters this year like they did last
yeah,
year. They don't have the shooters, but yeah, that's going to be key. I think both teams want to be, they want to play well defensively. And I know yesterday after the loss to Buffalo for Holtman, he said that defense has to be a staple of the team. Like it has to be a staple. And I thought they didn't actually play bad defensively against Buffalo. I mean, in spurts, yeah, they didn't play great, but when you're shooting on offense is so bad and you're missing a lot of shots, it's gonna transition over the defense, and it just doesn't have your defense can't get set up. If the other team's always running and all that. But DePaul, they're 77th ranked defensively on Ken Palm, so not the worst. Like they're solid
yeah,
defensively, but it's gonna come down to can DePaul score against Northwestern's defense. That's
yeah.
really what it comes down to, and I don't know if they can consistently score against that defense. I don't know what you think, Tom. Do you think DePaul is going to be able to score consistently against Northwestern defense, who Chris Collins and his defense and what
Yeah.
they bring to the table?
I think it just comes down to a physicality standpoint of can DePaul. That's been the difference. I don't like sure you could argue that it's talent over the last few years, but I really just think the more physical team's going to come out on top. Because if Chris Collins and his defense they can set the tone early, and if Northwestern sets the tone and they're just very physical and DePaul can't really match up to that, or it becomes a little overwhelming, that's where things get kind of tough, especially that's from and not even just from a physical standpoint, even a mental standpoint. Because if you get down, say, 10-2, Northwest starts off the game on a 10-2 run, you got to call a timeout. That's where things get kind of tricky. You're like, man, oh God, how can we match up?
Yep.
Or wow, they're just so big, or they're so much more physical than us. Then you start questioning the mental aspect of it all. That's how Chris Collins, like, they don't just beat you, like they wear you out. And that's the type of mentality that you need in a Big Ten conference. And that's something that DePaul they've never had because they have no confidence. This is a program that has unfortunately failed to find relevancy for years. We're going back decades where they I don't, they haven't made the tournament since like 2004. Where
Yep.
this is a team that in such a tough era of college sports with NIL, where it's so difficult just to match up. Where now they have so many hurdles to overcome. Like Chris Holtman seems like the right guy, but it's going to take time. And unfortunately, and this goes for Northwestern too, of this season, we're not, this is the true test for both teams.
Hmm.
Sure, Northwestern's handled Maryhurst 70
Yeah.
to 47, Boston University 76-52, Cleveland State 110 to 63. Where even knowing DePaul is, we don't know where they kind of stand.
Yeah.
They're a lot better than those teams. Just from a pro, you play in the Big East. Those are teams where you kind of Northwestern is expected to beat those teams in the way they did. And you got DePaul, Chicago State, Stonehill, beat them. Little better competition than
Yep.
Buffalo. You lost. So how do you evaluate them? We know what Northwestern brings to the table. What does DePaul bring? What is DePaul? What is their identity? And I think that's something that they're going to need to figure out heading into this game because what does Chris Collins do? He loves film. He loves just attacking his opponent's weaknesses. And I think physically, he's going to be able to match what DePaul can throw at him. And the question is, will they be able to respond? If not, it's going to be a repeat of what we've seen the last few years of games over by the by
Yeah.
the early second half, where the players are defeated, coach doesn't know what to do, and boom, it just gets out of hand so fast. And Chris Collins, if there's one thing he does not do, it is not blow leads.
Yep.
So once he gets a big lead on you, it's going to be really hard to come back. So DePaul's going to need to come out firing. They're going to need to match them physically. Question is, can they? Well, we're about to find out. So I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to is just from a physical and mental aspect of can they match up?
Yep.
We'll see.
I 100% agree with you on everything there. But before we get my thoughts on the key player for
Let's
DePaul in
get
this
it.
game, if they want to remain victorious, let's take a short commercial break and shout out the Blue Demon Banter podcast is now available on YouTube platform, along with Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Pocket Podcast. And if you want to see our extended thoughts about DePaul basketball, go check out We Are DePaul. We have daily stories coming out there, as well as our free newsletter, which you sign up for. You get stories every single day. If you want to read my thoughts after Buffalo's loss, go check it out on We Are DePaul. And please subscribe to our newsletter. It is for free into your inbox every single morning, Tom. But, Tom, the key for this game for DePaul, if they do want to come out with a victory here, is going to be the play of Leighton Blocker. It's going to be the play. It
Yeah.
all starts with Leighton Blocker handling the ball. And to be honest with you, offensively, it hasn't been there for Leighton Blocker over the past two games. 4 points on 14% shooting against Stonehill, 4 points on 12% shooting against Buffalo. He needs to step up in this game if DePaul wants a shot because they have not had offense in the second half of Stonehill and in Buffalo. They did not have much offense. So Leighton Blocker has to show what he did last year in the second half of the season when DePaul was a much better, much competitive team. Leighton Blocker has to step up in this game. Leighton Blocker has to take over. And Leighton Blocker, most importantly, take care of the basketball. If they trap you, find the open guys, find CJ Gunn, find AJ Benson underneath. But Leighton Blocker is going to be the key in this game. Tom, what's the key for you, DePaul, Northwestern?
Well, yeah, I think blocker is kind of like the no-brainer. I feel like you kind of know what you're getting from NJ Benson. You
Yeah,
know what you're getting from CJ Gunn. But with blocker, it's like, okay, he averages 4.3 assists per game, and he averages 2.3 steals per game. So we know he's putting in the effort on both sides of the ball. He's a true facilitator. But at some point, as much as you want to be a facilitator and you want to get others involved, there's nothing wrong with taking over a game.
yep,
There's nothing wrong with if you're a point guard or even at the two there, there's no take 12 shots a game. Take 12 to 15 shots. If you're hot, you're hot. Obviously, if you're cold, school back a little
yeah,
bit. But that's my problem with a lot of guards just throughout college sports, where it's like they're almost comfortable being a facilitator.
yeah,
Where if you could drive to the lane and you're physical enough and you feel really good about how you're feeling heading into that game, take some shots. Let's see what you got. If not, you got Benson and you got Gunn. So yeah, I kind of agree. I would say for him because you're gonna have to match Northwestern.
yeah,
Nick Martinelli's taken at least 20 shots.
yeah,
So
and he's
and that
good.
kind of yeah, and that just follows into like my key for him, Nick Martinelli. I think he's someone that if he gets going, he is going to body you. He is going to set you up in the post and he is going to get his work in. It doesn't matter if he's 0 for 5 in the first 10 minutes of the game. He's going to put up 20 more shots. He might shoot 25, as crazy as that sounds, but he had some games last year where he got up there where if they're not there, he has no problem taking over a game. There's a reason he was in the mix to be the Big Ten Player of the Year last year. So for me, I think Nick Martinelli, if he's getting 20, 25 shots and he's hitting about 60% of those from the field and he's getting hot because he's shooting like 83%, I think, from deep this year. It's on 5 of 6 shooting,
Yeah,
but 5 out of 6 threes is you're on a pretty good pace. So I think if he gets hot, Northwestern's going to steamroll pretty early. But yeah, blockers got to get involved. You need to have three productive players for DePaul. And for Northwestern, they could survive with maybe just Martinelli doing good and others. But man, for DePaul, you almost have to play flawless when you're playing a team like Northwestern. We'll say if you get Benson and you get Gunn, say they score about 12 to 15 each, and you can even get Blocker into just 10 points, just get them in double digits. This will probably be a close game. But if you get to halftime and you and Benson and Gunn are not doing what they normally do and Blocker is still not getting going, odds are it's a very lopsided game come that point. So I think for DePaul, I agree. Blocker, I don't want to say he has to step up because I think when it comes to certain players, if that's not what they do,
hmm,
and like if you are a point guard and you are a facilitator, no coach, I don't care if you're Chris Holtman, should not expect you to shoot 15 shots a game and shoot 65% from the
yeah,
field and score double digits. Facilitate the ball, drive to the lane, get to the free throw line. That should probably be the expectation to play good defense. So if Blocker can drive to the lane and he could get going, say even we'll say hypothetically in the first half, 7 shots, and he can hit about 4 or 5 of those, get to about 8 points, depending what the free throws look like, rack up a few assists, play good defense. DePaul's going to be in that game. So as long as he's productive, I don't know if he has to step up, but if he's productive, I think DePaul has a really good chance to stay competitive in this game.
yep.
Martinelli, if he's hot, he's hot. There's nothing you could do. Like DePaul, as much as I want to say all these great things about DePaul, the Big Ten is a very tough conference.
Yeah,
Michigan State struggled against Nick Martinelli last year. Nearly every single program in the Big Ten could not find an answer to stop Nick Martinelli. So, do I have faith that DePaul is going to be able to this early in the season? Maybe not. But if they do, this game's going to be close. But if he gets going and he's feeling the hot hand early, I think that's going to spell a lot of trouble for DePaul, and they're going to be just coming from behind. So containing him will be key. Question is, can they? We'll
yep,
see. But I think that's why this matchup is so intriguing from both sides, is because we have no idea what to expect from either team.
yep.
You could
DePaul,
like if you told me DePaul came out and won like by like a few points or something like that, I'd be like, you know what, that does not surprise me because Northwestern's not been tested yet.
yeah.
DePaul, they have also not really been tested. You
Facts.
could count Buffalo, but like you really don't want to get tested from Buffalo, which is why that loss was so unfortunate. Um, so yeah, DePaul, offensive consistency will be key. And Northwestern, as long as they just remain physical and they out rebound DePaul, which I think is very likely because Northwestern always has size. Um, I would say that's probably the difference between the two teams. So yeah, I'm going blocker for DePaul, and I'm gonna go Martinelli, of course, for Northwestern because he's just such a stud.
DePaul's got to stop Martinelli. Like that's going to be key on the defensive end.
Hmm.
He's just a hooper, you know. Like he's just a straight
He
hooper.
is.
Just a baller, and DePaul has to have an answer for him. And Blocker, yeah, I mean we talked about it. I think Blocker be productive. I would like to see him take over because we saw towards the end of last year he took over games and it led to a win over Georgetown when he had 16 points on 7-11 shooting. Then in the first round of the Big East tournament, another 16 points and they won. And then in the overtime loss, double overtime loss to Creighton, he had 25 points on 8 of 19 shooting. So
Mhm.
Blocker has the potential to take over. Hasn't really taken over games yet this year. Let's see that on Friday against Northwestern. But before we end this episode, Tom, I want to draft DePaul
Let's do it.
Northwestern teams. We're going to go back and forth drafting DePaul
Ooh,
slash Northwestern players
yeah.
over the last 10 years only. Not all time, you know, only over the last 10 seasons. We'll start with DePaul Northwestern. Tom, since you are the guest on this show, you can have number one pick, all
Okay.
DePaul Northwestern players on the table over the last 10 years. So we'll say from the 2016 season.
All right. I feel like because I wrote a story back when I was in school
Mm-hmm.
about him in making an impact in the NBA Finals. So I feel like it's only right to start this draft off with Max Strus. I
That's a
feel
good
like
one.
Strus is just a guy. We need scorers, but ultimately, come on, he between the two programs, I think he's made one of the biggest impacts imaginable, and he
Yep.
signed a pretty hefty contract with the Cavaliers, either like two off seasons ago. So yeah, Max Strus, he's just when you think of DePaul basketball, there's been a lot of bright spots, in recent memory, but Max Strus is 1000% one of them. So yeah, I think I gotta go Max
Yeah,
Strus. I
that's a
think
good one.
he's
That's
so
good.
good.
Now I get two picks. We'll do a snake draft here.
Yep, Snake.
I think it's tough because I think I'm gonna go the other the Paul guy to come out of the draft, Paul Reed to come out of the league.
Yep.
Paul Reed, I'm gonna go Paul Reed here. I think he was really good at DePaul. And it's unfortunate that the Paul team with Paul Reed and Max Juice didn't go anywhere. But I'll go him. And then second, I think this is a tough one here because I have two guys in mind, and hopefully you don't take the other. But I'm gonna go with Boo Buie here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buie, believe he has the most points in Northwestern basketball history. So I'm gonna go Boo Buie here with my pick, and then Tom, you're on the clock with back-to-back picks.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be an interesting one. For me, this is gonna like I feel like a very unconventional pick, but he's just that talented. I'm going Brooks Barnheiser.
Yep.
I think, and I'm putting him at point guard just because
Oh,
like I love him as a facilitator. I love his defense. And he's just someone that I think. He's
yeah.
just such a good player. I mean, he made Chris Collins cry because he had a season-ending
Yep.
injury. We've seen him; he's on the Thunder, I believe, in the G League right now on a two-way deal. So, yeah, I mean, I think Brooks Barnhizer is definitely a guy that we gotta go with here. And there's so many good options. Who did you take again? Just
I took
you took Boo Buie and
Paul Reed, and Boo
okay, I
Buie.
thought it was Paul Reed.
Yeah,
Okay,
Paul
you
Reed
did
and Boo
take
Buie.
Paul Reed, this is where it gets tough because both programs have such great players.
Yeah,
But I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't take Nick Martinelli
yeah,
only because
it is
of his
tough.
relationship with Brooks Barnhizer. And it's like, come on, I think we need some chemistry on the court here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was gonna take him. I think he's so good. He could score the basketball. Well, that's a good one. I got two picks coming here. I think I'm gonna take two DePaul players here. I'm gonna take the guy who has tore up the G League in recent years, in Javon Freeman Liberty, a
Oh
guy that
yeah.
I got to cover. So I'll gladly take Javon. And the other one I think is tough, but I think I'm gonna take Eli Kane here. You remember Eli
Okay.
Kane a couple years ago?
Oh, go
Um,
bag.
I feel like he could run the point for me, or he could run the two and Javon the point. I actually have a lot of point guards on my team, but we'll figure it out later. We'll figure it out later. So I took Javon Freeman, Liberty,
Yeah.
and Kane, and you got two picks here to round out your starting five.
Yeah, I think this is a very uh, as much as I want to like take some of these, Northwestern players, like I would love a Trey Singleton,
Yeah.
based on his potential. He's the biggest recruit Chris Collins Northwestern has ever landed. But compared to my own eyes, I'm taking Javon Johnson.
Yeah.
I loved him at DePaul, but I'm gonna slide him into the four. He's got the size and he's just a baller. I know what I'm getting from him on both ends. So we're just keeping the size going. I mean, we got Brooks, we got Martinelli, we got Struess, we got a lot of size here. So yeah, I gotta go Javon.
And who's gonna round out
Um,
your starting five here?
yeah, he hasn't played. I'll be honest, he has not played. So this is totally just keeping the size, but I'm gonna go with Isaiah Medina
Okay.
from DePaul. He hasn't played yet, but he's a four-star recruit. He's one of the biggest recruits that DePaul has had, and he's 7 foot.
Yep.
And I believe on for 24/7 Sports, I believe he has like a 90 grade. So he's a very he is a player that has such high upside and who a lot of recruitment coordinators they're very high on. So I'm going him and we're going size.
Yeah, that's a size Medina red shirt this year, but assuming he's back
Yep.
next year, should be a lot of potential. He can shoot the ball. With my pick to round it out, I'm also going to take a current player because why not, right?
Eh,
I'm going to take a current DePaul player. I'm going to take the great scorer in CJ Gunn. It was tough between
yeah.
Gunn and Benson, but I trust Paul Reed at the center position. So give me CJ Gunn to round out my starting five.
Love
And
it.
viewers, let us know. Listeners, let us know which
Yeah.
starting five you like better. Mine, Paul Reed, Boo Buie, Javon Freeman Liberty, Eli King, and CJ Gunn. Or Tom's here, Max Strus, Brooks Barnheiser, Nick Martinelli, Javon Johnson, and Isaiah Medina. That's going to do it on this episode of the Blue Demon Banter. Tom, fantastic to have you on the show. Hopefully, you can get out to a game this year, and hopefully, DePaul can come away with the victory. But as always, guys,
So
go DePaul, go.